Hi there, I'm Allison Carrack, owner of Stitch Real Estate Transaction Coordination Company, and welcome back to my channel. Before we dive into the topic of today's video, which I'm really excited about, if you've been enjoying any of our other content, I hope you will like this video and also hit the subscribe button so you don't miss anything else exciting we have coming up. All right, now onto the main topic of today's video. So today's video is all about templates. What are templates and what kind of templates do you need in your real estate transaction coordinator business? I found in a lot of my coaching and conversations with other TCs that especially when you're just getting started or exploring this career, you hear a lot about templates, right? And I'm going to talk about two main types of templates today. We're going to start with email templates and then we're going to talk about task templates. Email templates may be something you're more familiar with from any type of role or other industry even, but task templates are a little more specific, and I find that's where a lot of TCs, especially newer ones, need some clarity, but they're really helpful, so I'm excited to dive in deeper. So for each of these two types of templates, we're going to cover what they are, what you need, how to create them, and then how to use them and set them up for success. So let's dive right in. All right, so starting with email templates. So what is an email template? An email template at its core is essentially an email that you send frequently that you can save and use on a repetitive basis so that you aren't having to type the same or very similar emails over and over again. As a transaction coordinator, you can probably see how this is extremely helpful because we utilize a certain checklist all the time. Each real estate transaction, while they're all a little different, have a very similar process that we're going to go through with all very similar milestones. So by having set email templates that we can just copy and paste and reuse, it can save us a lot of time. Okay, so now what kind of email templates do you need? So with email templates specifically, you could go down a whole rabbit hole. I know TCs who probably have hundreds of email templates, and there's probably some that have 10. I would start with a baseline. So the best way to figure out how many email templates you need or what email templates you need, especially if you aren't really experienced in the real estate or TC world, is to look at your checklist. So if you don't have a checklist for each of your core services, then pause this video and come back to it later once you have one. What you need this for is we're going to base our email templates off this and also our task template. So it's really important we have our core checklist. So each of our core services, maybe our buyer contract close, seller contract close, and listing, for example, we want to have those checklists ready of what we're going to be handling as the TC so that we can set up all of our templates appropriately. Okay, I'm going to assume if you're watching at this point, you have checklists set up. So grab your checklist and look at each item on the checklist and think, what kind of email do I need to be sending to get the appropriate information out? And then you might look at, is this something that I'm going to repeat a lot? Or is this something that's going to be different for each transaction? And it could be, for example, a buyer email that goes out when they first go under contract that tells them instructions about their earnest money, and it provides them with their key dates or maybe other parties' info, whatever you want. But that would be a step to look at your checklist and see that it says send buyer earnest money instructions. Maybe let's go ahead and make that into an email template so we can just reuse the same email every time and not have to repeat it. So grab your checklist, and that can kind of help as a starting point to figure out what you need. From there, I would recommend starting with a baseline of email templates, maybe even just like 5 to 10. And then as you work in your TC business and you learn, you'll come across things that you find yourself repeating a lot or using the same thing. And by creating email templates and then learning how to streamline them, which is coming up, we'll save ourselves a ton of time and also make sure we are giving consistency to the client. So that's another valuable piece of these templates, is that we're not changing up our language and our process each time so the clients can get comfortable with the emails we're sending and things like that. So you will need email templates for a couple of your core services and probably all of your major milestones, at least on the checklist, but you can create as many as you want. A couple examples, I mentioned buyer under contract, maybe a utility reminder for the buyers, a pre-closing email, maybe a post-closing email. I hope that kind of helps you get the gist. All right. And then now, how do we create them? So we are creating them, like I said, based off our checklist. But if you're brand new to this, you may say, I don't know what to say, So there's a lot of resources available online, maybe some coming up from your favorite transaction coordinator YouTuber. And other than that, if you have experience in the real estate world, you probably have templates you've already used. If you're an agent, if you've worked in title, you've probably seen emails like this come through. So you can look into that or say, what emails have I sent that are like that? And you can create those based off that. Otherwise, you can create them from scratch. So maybe you know that when a buyer goes under contract based on your checklist you've created, you need to send them earnest money and inspection instructions. You want to send them their key dates. You can totally just type something up yourself if you can't just find a resource online or you find one that you don't like. So there's lots of resources available, but you can also completely start from scratch if you'd like to as well. All right, now to my favorite part of each of these is how do we use them and how do we set ourselves up for success? How do we really utilize these to be extremely efficient? So I'm gonna kind of take you on a journey through the 3 steps of email templates. So an email template, when you get to this stage and you've created what we've discussed, maybe you've created them all in a Word document. Now, you could, each time this comes up that you need to send one of these emails, copy and paste from that Word document and fill in anything that you need to. This is an email template at its base level and its core, and this is what I very first started with. The next kind of level up is to integrate these email templates into your email provider. So for example, in Gmail, you have the option when you create a new email to save it as a template. And then when you're creating new emails after that, you can use the template and autofill it. However, you will have to still probably add in information like, purchase price and things like that. But this is kind of the next step up that helps save you a little bit more time. And lastly, my favorite part, which is using email templates in your transaction management software. I have preached about this in other videos if you've been following me. It used to take me about an hour to process a new contract, and now it takes me 20 to 30 minutes. And a huge chunk of that cut down time was using these pre-fillable email templates with merge fields. So we're about to go into that in a lot more detail. So what you can do once you've created, a Word document or whatever it may be with all of your email templates, if you're using a transaction management software, which I could not recommend enough, currently I'm using A-Frame. You may be thinking of other options like TC Docs, Open to Close, Listikit, things like that. You can take your email templates you created, go into the email template section within the software and copy and paste those in there. Now you'll have them within your transactions. But how do we take this even a step further? We want to utilize merge fields or smart fields, whatever they're called in that particular system, so that the emails can auto-populate information pertinent to the transaction and specific to the transaction. Let me give you an example of this. So an example on our buyer under contract email we talked about earlier is it probably says, "Hi, buyer." Instead of manually typing that buyer name like we would have to if we were copy and pasting or even using a Gmail template, the beauty of these software email templates is that we can use a smart field, merge field, and we can pull in something that says buyer name. And that's going to be a little piece of data that tells the system when we make an email within a transaction, it's going to automatically say, "Hi, John," if I put the buyer's name in as John. You can see how this could be really helpful because it goes on and on. All of these systems have different merge field options, but they usually are vast. So we can have the property address auto-populate, the buyer and seller names auto-populate. We can have the key dates auto-populate, other parties' information like the title company name, the earnest money amount. Your list really goes on and on how much you can customize these templates. And what I love about this is I only have to really focus on putting all the information in to the transaction when I start it. And then every email I send from within the transaction after that with my email templates, it's auto-populating all that information. Not only does this save a ton of time where you're not manually typing things into each email, but it also helps reduce human error. All I need to do is make sure I enter the information correctly the first time into the system, and then the computer's just copying it. So there's no chance, if I wrote the address 10 times in an email, there might be a 10% chance I misspell it one time. But with the computer doing everything automatically, we eliminate that. So not only does this help you look more professional, more consistent, and save you a ton of time, it's also taking away any of that human error aspect, so you don't have to triple check your emails. I recommend I always still read over mine at least one time in case the computer didn't catch something or I entered something incorrectly. But you don't have to check 10 times to make sure your email reads perfect, because you know the computer's done the majority of the heavy lifting in making sure everything looks good for you. So this is the biggest benefit of email templates. No matter what, even if you're using them on their simplest level, I definitely think you should have email templates in your TC business. But to really differentiate your experience and make your business extremely efficient, you need to be using the email templates with the merge fields within your transaction management software. Any questions about that, or you want me to dive in deeper, leave a comment below. All right, now let's go into task templates. So what is a task template? A task template is essentially a set of pre-populated tasks that we enter within our transaction management system. And when we apply it to a transaction, it then tells us what we need to do each day for the transaction. So if we have our checklist, that's how we're going to create a task template. You can also think of a task template essentially as a living, breathing, or electronic form of the checklist. It's really a long running list of your checklist, but we're going to take it a step further and really utilize it to be efficient. So how do we create a task template? To create a task template, we're gonna need our checklist. And so going back to the what do we need, how many do we need? We need our checklist and task templates at a very minimum for each of our core service offerings, like I mentioned earlier. So if you offer seller contract close, buyer contract close, and listing coordination, I would have a baseline 3 task templates. If you have other services like compliance or lease or something else, I would go ahead and create those as well. Now, we will talk at the end about how we can customize templates and make more of them, but let's start with our baseline. So whatever we have a checklist for, we're gonna create a task template for. So now, how do we create the task template? Task templates are going to be specific to transaction management systems. So if you're managing everything in paper files or Excel, then you're basically just working off your checklist. The difference of a task template is that when we create it in the transaction management system, it is a living, breathing thing that is intuitive off other details we provide within the transaction. So when I create a task template, usually this is done within the admin, or there's a just task template thing to create them within the software. What we're gonna do, I pull up my checklist over here, and I'm gonna create custom tasks for each of my checklist items. So if my checklist item says send buyer new contract email, I'm gonna make a task template task that says send buyer new contract email. Checklist says confirm receipt of earnest money. I'm gonna create a task template task that says confirm receipt of earnest money. Are you catching my drift? Now, here's kind of going into the part of how we create it, but also how do we use it and how do we set ourselves up for success. The great part about these software's task templates is when I'm setting it up, I can really customize them to be auto-intuitive. So for example, it may say confirm receipt of earnest money on my checklist. So I create a task that says confirm receipt of earnest money on my task template. Now, it may ask you in the system, when do you want to do this task? You can most likely put in there 3 days after the effective date, or whatever the deadline is for that particular task or deadline. Now, what this means is when I have an actual transaction, I can pull up my task template, and as long as I put the effective date in there, now it's gonna automatically tell me 3 days from that date, hey, you need to confirm receipt of the earnest money today. If you haven't utilized this before, do you see how huge that is? Having your checklist in a living, breathing form, in the form of a task template that is intuitive, it allows you to have one long to-do list, maybe short, depending if we're just getting started, each day of exactly what needs to be done that day. And that is based off the key dates and deadlines of the transaction, because every transaction is different, right? If we're working off a paper checklist and it just says order HOA documents, I may not see that until maybe it's a little too late or something. But if I have on my task template to make sure I order it 10 days before the HOA deadline, then no matter when that falls in the transaction, because some of them it could be 7 days to get it, some it could be 21, it's going to tell me based off that particular transaction's deadline exactly when I need to do it. I don't have to run through the whole checklist every day. That's the other part I like about this is I can work off whatever system's main dashboard and just, it tells me what to do that day. I don't have to figure it out for my own because it's pulling off the key dates and the transaction information that I put in, and then I applied my task template that I created. So you create your task template by adding all of your checklist tasks as transaction tasks on a task template, and then you can customize them for what dates you want them to be intuitive off of. You can do before, you can do same day as, you can do day after. Another example would be send buyer new contract email, same day as effective date is how I'd set that up. So you will go through and do this, put in all the tasks and what dates you want them on. You can also do a hard date if you want. Typically, I don't find that as helpful, but you can. And each system's a little different, but they all should be intuitive off of this. So that is so huge in your business, is to have this living, breathing, intuitive checklist. It tells you exactly what you need to do each day. You don't need to question it. So it is an amazing tool that we need to use to set ourselves up for success. Now, I mentioned I was going to talk about customizing them. So another great thing about all of these softwares you're probably going to use is you can copy these email or task templates really easily and then customize them. So like I said, what do we need for task templates? We need our base checklist for each service created into a task template. But after that, we can take it as far as we want. So maybe we have certain agents or brokerages or teams that we work with as independent TCs, or maybe specific types of transactions like cash or something like that. If you're an in-house TC, you're only working with one team or brokerage. You can create different task templates for different kinds of transactions, different agents, different brokerages. That way, if there's a specific task that isn't needed for one brokerage, or there's an additional task that is needed for one brokerage, or there's a brokerage that needs all the documents 7 days before closing, and there's one that needs them 2 days after the execution, we can set the timing of their task differently within their template. So there's a ton of customization you can do. Right now I'm using A-Frame. You can attach specific emails to the task. I know you can do that in Listikit as well. There's all kinds of different stuff you can do, prioritizing, adding notes to task, all kinds of stuff within the different systems. And so you can play around with that, but the first most important thing is to set up your email templates and set up your task templates. I know that was a little bit of an information dump, so I hope you found it helpful. Any questions, anything you want me to dive deeper on, drop a comment below. And as always, be sure to hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss anything else. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day.